since the dawn of time, better known as 2002, one dream has permeated the mind of every Pokémon fan. A white whale, spoken of in hushed whispers across the internet, that grew more and more elusive with each passing year. People have speculated about it, yearned for it, and yet it still eludes us. A Pokémon game with every region. I mean, can you imagine an entire globe to explore, limitless team possibilities where the fun never ends? Wouldn't that be awesome? Oh! 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 Ow! Oh! Yeah! I got some bad news. Moby Dick came out in 1850, big whales only live 60 to 70 years. That white whale's been dead for a while. And so is the dream of a Pokemon game with every region. But I think the reason this dream was so pervasive across the internet once upon a time is because it's technically happened twice. Pokemon Red and Blue let us explore the Kanto region, which at the time was every region. All one of them. The next games, Gold and Silver, introduced us to the new Johto region. But wait, what's this? You get to go back to Kanto and once again explore every region? Now, obviously this trend wasn't sustainable, and ever since Generation 3, we have never been able to revisit locations from previous games. No, the Blueberry Academy doesn't count. And it's not because Game Freak got lazy, it's because they have a shockingly small team and management that won't let them spend any time or money, but also because a Pokemon game with every region would be a bloated, boring, static mess. How could you keep a game that big exciting when all your Pokemon are fully evolved before you leave Kanto? How do you balance the levels of the opponents so you don't max out immediately and just ride with the same level 100 guys for the next 150 hours? Ultimately, this is one of those ideas that sounds cool on paper, but doesn't really work in practice. But here at the Chiptide Show, I don't like to just point out problems, I like to offer solutions. So today, we're gonna dive deep into the logistics of a Pokemon game with every region, figure out when exactly this dream died, and then suggest a few ways you could actually make it work. Richard, hit that intro. Oh! Oh, you son of a... The main problem with a Pokemon game with every region is experience. If you're dumping 9 games worth of experience into the same 6 or so Pokemon, they're gonna hit that level 100 cap real quick. How quick? I'm glad you asked, because figuring that out will require just a little bit of math. Stick with me here. Let's assume that you're using the same team of 6 Pokemon across this whole mega game, and the levels of the opponents are not scaled to match your own. You're basically just trading your whole Kanto team into Johto and absolutely stomping Silver into the dirt. I know this isn't very realistic, but this is just like a jumping off point. We'll get to the scaling part later. In a game like this, in which region do you think your team would hit level 100? Leave your guesses in the comments down below. The first thing we need to do is figure out about how much experience you're getting, on average, in each region by itself. Now this is obviously going to differ depending on the Pokemon you choose, the trainers you fight, and if you're a psychopath who doesn't obliterate the ozone layer with repels, but I ended up deriving a simple formula to get a pretty good estimate. First, let's assume that all 6 of your Pokemon have a medium-fast experience growth rate. If you didn't know, different species of Pokemon have different formulas to determine the amount of experience required to gain a level. The majority of Pokemon fall within the medium-fast category, where their level is equal to the cubed root of the total experience they've gained. You'll probably have some Pokemon that are slower than this, like your starter, but others that are faster, so it's a good middle ground. Next, let's assume that you're trying to keep all your Pokemon at around the same level. Your starter's probably going to eat up a lot of early experience, just due to it being the only one you have. But when you get that Eevee later on down the line, you're probably going to want to funnel as much experience into it as you can until it catches up. And finally, let's assume that you leave each region after defeating the Pokemon League for the first time. No post-game content included. In a typical playthrough, unless you choose to grind a ton in Victory Road to absolutely smoke the whole league, you'll probably naturally end up around on par with the middle Elite Four member. So let's assume that by the time the credits roll, your whole team is one level higher than the lowest leveled member of the third Elite Four member of that region. So in Kanto, you'd be around 55. Confused? We'll get it together, because we haven't even gotten to the math part yet. Using this formula, we can calculate the total amount of experience each Pokemon would need to reach the target level for each region by solving for E. To make sure this formula is at least somewhat accurate, I did some simulations with different popular Kanto teams, and found that while this is pretty close, there are a few conflicting factors that we didn't account for. First of all, while the majority of Pokemon do tend to be in the medium-fast group, a lot of the popular ones that you're more likely to use actually fall into the medium-slow group, like all the starters and the early bird Pokemon, which means they'll require a bit more experience than we've calculated. However, you're also not catching Pokemon at level 1, meaning they'll already effectively come with some experience that you don't need to get. These factors put together means that our estimate is actually around 5,000 experience points higher than reality, which we can easily account for. And now we have ourselves a formula for the amount of experience points a single Pokemon will probably gain over the course of a single region. For those curious, I found that Johto yields the least amount of experience because of its massive post-game that we skipped, while Kalos actually yields the most. So going back to our hypothetical mega game, we can now figure out what level your team will be at the end of each region by adding together the total experience of the regions completed thus far and plugging it into our level formula for a typical medium-fast Pokemon. Obviously, by the end of Kanto, you'll be the same level you would have been anyway. But through your entire Johto journey, you'll end up gaining a whopping 7 levels. You'll hit level 100 about halfway through your Alola journey, and if we decide to ignore the level cap, by the time you finished off Paldea, you'd be level 114. This is surprisingly low for beating 9 games, but remember, in this simulation, we didn't scale Pokemon's levels to match our own, and lower level Pokemon naturally yield less experience. That being said, there is a slight issue here. This estimate is using the experience formula from generations 3 and 4, which does not account for the difference in your levels. In Generation 5 onward, they use some variation on a scaling formula, in which defeating Pokemon that are higher level than you yields bonus experience. And more important for us, defeating a lower level Pokemon yields significantly less than it even would normally, meaning the final level your Pokemon would actually be at is probably significantly lower than this. But none of that actually matters, because all of this is assuming that each new generation does not scale to meet your levels. And if we want a game that's actually fun after the first 20 or so hours and not a lawn mowing simulator, then we're probably going to want to bump up those levels to give you a comparable challenge. To adjust for that, let's take a closer look at that experience yield formula. From Generation 7 onward, the amount of experience you get from defeating a Pokemon can be found with this formula, where L is the level of the Pokemon you just beat, LP is your level, B is the base EXP yield of the Pokemon you just beat, we'll get to that, and all this stuff at the end is for things like lucky eggs and O powers that modify your experience that we're just going to ignore for now. This time, let's assume that you're now always around the same level as the Pokemon you're fighting. The base experience yield is a constant unique to each Pokemon species that determines how much a given species will pay off. Based on my research, I found that the average experience yield across the board is around 50. Turns out I actually wrote the wrong number in the script. It's 164, but all the rest of the math should be right. So let's go ahead and plug that into our formula. Now we want to know how much more experience a Pokemon will yield if its levels are increased by a certain amount to match your own. So as a test case, I looked at the first battle of the game and calculated how much experience you would get if both you and their starter were increased by any given level. Then I made a graph plotting the increase in level versus the ratio between the experience you got and the experience you would have gotten if everyone was still level 5. And then I performed some linear regression to get this formula right here, which gives us the multiplier for the total experience yield of a battle in which levels were increased by any value X. Remember a couple of minutes ago when I said that we'd only need a little bit of math? So I might have lied. If I lost any of you, basically, we did all of that to be able to find how much experience you would get if the levels of each region are increased such that each one starts at the same level the previous one ended. We can then use this to recalibrate our experience yields per region and recalculate the level your team would reach. This time around, you're almost level 100 by the time you finish Johto. Which makes sense. That's slightly higher than the ending levels of the game that actually does include these two regions. Our estimate was slightly higher because the real Gen 2 cuts a lot of major segments out of Kanto that we would ideally like to keep in. Assuming you don't gut each region of content, you'd probably hit level 100 by the time you beat Roxanne. That's a lot of game to go without any more growth, so let's remove that level cap and keep on growing throughout the games. With the unscaled version, we hit level 100 around midway through Alola. Now at that same point, you'd be just over double that at 205, and by the end, you'll be around 243. Now that, in and of itself, isn't technically a problem. It seems that Pokemon are already toying with the idea of surpassing that arbitrary max level anyway. As long as the enemy Pokemon keep up, levels could theoretically get as high as you want while still being fair and balanced. The real problem is that all of the interesting stuff will have still happened in your first game. All your Pokemon will have already evolved long ago, you'll have learned all your good moves and found the items that you like. Sure, you could always rebalance it to space these things out across 250 levels as opposed to 100, but then you just have long, boring stretches in the middle of your journey where nothing changes. Now, most people would look at this problem and see a problem. But I see something to be solved. So, how can we make a game that includes all 9 Pokemon regions in a way that's still fun and exciting throughout? The way I see it, there are 3 options. The first, and perhaps most simple, is to take the Ash Ketchum route and force players to ditch their old teams each time they go to a new region and start over from scratch. This way you won't have to do any fancy level calibration or fundamentally alter movesets and evolutions, and if you want to make it feel like a more cohesive experience, maybe each time you hit a league, you can temporarily access your old boxes and bring back some all-stars who will, in theory, already be at the right level because they've been in stasis this whole time. And that does sound kinda cool, but at the same time, it's basically just a Pokemon collection pack with some built-in Pokemon Home sort of functionality. Which, now that I say it, would probably sell like absolute gangbusters. But it's not really a game with every region. It's 9 separate games in a trench coat. And to me, the whole allure of a game like this is getting to bring the same team across the whole world with you. And look, I know I just did probably around 10 minutes worth of math proving why that isn't feasible. But this video is all about dreaming, right? So let's dream big. We've already said that levels can continue to grow past 100, so why does everything else need to stop too? Sure, you could delay evolution so they're evenly distributed throughout the game, or you could just keep adding more. I mean, who says we have to stop at Charizard? Let's keep going. Let's get Charagon, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Hail Charhydra. Let me stop Geta with Chargod. I mean, it's pretty simple, really. For each 3-stage evolution line, you just need to add 25 new forms, evolving at specifically levels 54, 70, 85, 99, 109, 118, 127, 138, 148, 158, 164, 169, 174, 182, 190, 197, 203, 209, 213, 219, 224, 229, 234, 239, and 244 to ensure that they come evenly spaced across each region. That didn't seem that hard, just keep adding Diglets. Though, side note, do you think it adds 2 Diglett every time it evolves and it would end up with 35? Or it gets multiplied by 3, and you can run around with a swarm of 129 million of the little guys. And while we're adding new stuff, we probably need to throw in a bunch of new moves to go along with all these new forms, because let's be honest, Thunderbolt and Earthquake just ain't gonna hit as hard after a while. Let the attacks increase to similar levels of lunacy. What, you thought that coughing, exploding was scary? Just wait till Black Lugging shows up and drops an atom bomb on ya. Now, obviously, while this is all very fun to talk about, it is, admittedly, a tad bit unrealistic. But heck, nowadays Game Freak can hardly get one region working before they shove it out the door. And adding in this many evolutions would put the Pokedex at a cool 22,037 Pokemon. Ain't no way they'd reverse dex it after that. So, let's see if we can find a compromise here. So far, we've been assuming that a Pokemon game with every region needs to include all of every region. But does it really? Do we really need to explore all 196 routes in the franchise? Do we really need to go through Viridian Forest and every other area that's designed to be kind of like Viridian Forest? Would anyone be mad if they cut Seaward Cave? Do you even know where that is? What if instead we got a more focused, normal length game that just takes you through the greatest hits? A globe-trotting adventure where you get to visit all the most iconic locations from each region and skip over the parts that you probably won't even notice they cut. You could follow some overarching story about probably Team Rocket again, knowing Game Freak. They've already been to the well 3 times, why not another? I mean, it's always a little weird how every evil team has plans for world domination that are entirely contained to an area that's realistically the size of like a neighborhood. Give me a proper Team Rocket that has evolved into a global mafia, and you're a globe-trotting detective trying to track them down like James Bond or Looker. Wait a minute. It could be a Looker game. I mean, dude's already been in 5 of the 9 regions. You could easily retcon it into a few more. Game Freak, you could give us a Looker game. Game Freak, you keep chasing these buzzwords making some underbaked open world nonsense. You could just give us a Looker game and everyone would be happy. You'd make so much money. You could have all my money. I'd come crawling back. So anyway, That's my pitch for how to do a Pokemon game with every single region. Is it gonna happen? Probably not. But hey, maybe that's for the best. Knowing modern Game Freak, probably wouldn't be that great anyway. And hey, while you're here, if you like this video and want to keep watching, maybe check out this one, where I break down the data to figure out why the state of modern Pokemon games makes you yearn so much for the days of yore. Richard, oh! You thought you were gonna get me? Nah. I know my rule of threes, alright? I saw that payoff coming a mile away. You're gonna have to get up a lot earlier if you want to catch me. And a massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon, including Aspa102, Alakazam, Captain Kirby, Sherry and Mark, Sidian, Big Dog Ty for to win, The Boss Killer 94, Stylish, Ty Studio, Alex, and Richard Devotee III.